the Semaphore Music Festival Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Simon, and today we're thrilled to have the amazing Rosie Roberts, one key element of indie folk band Axe The Ivory. With their soulful harmonies, evocative lyrics and authentic sound, Axe The Ivory have been captivating audiences across Australia. We're excited to chat with Rosie today about the band's music, their journey, and of course, their upcoming performance at the Semaphore Music Festival this October long weekend. Rosie, thanks for your time today and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam. It's great to have a chat with you.
Rosie, your sound, the band's sound is a really unique blend of indie and folk and even like 60s sort of Simon and Garfunkel-esque pop to its songwriting. It's all a mixed grill. It's fantastic to hear that in such a young band, but can you tell us how the band Axe The Ivory came to be and how you actually refined it down to that sound?
Yeah, so we've been playing music together for a really long time. And although I would say probably on grant applications, we say we've only been playing for a year or two, but we've had a lot of time to kind of pull lots of different things together. And a lot of people kind of say we've got a bit of a unique sound. And I think part of that is probably because we've got two songwriters, two lead singers in the band, which is probably a bit unusual. And so, yeah, actually you're spot on. One of the biggest influences on Ben Lovell, the other songwriter, is Simon and Garfunkel. So I think that probably heavily influences him. And yeah, so I'm probably a little bit more pop leaning. He's probably a bit more folk leaning. And we've got, a banjo player that brings sometimes a bit of that bluegrass feel as well. So lots of elements going on, I think, all the time.
And even like, say, for instance, like James, who's your drummer, at times I can hear, W.S. Holland, who was in the Johnny Cash band, in the Tennessee Three, and then other times you hear sort of jazz feels, like sort of the Buddy Rich sounds. So it seems to be when you have a band of this, I suppose, caliber, all the diverse influences form and sort of fuse one amazing impact, don't they?
Yeah, I hope so. And I think, maybe part of it as well is probably because we are first and foremost a band of best mates. Like, I think it is a bit of a democracy. So like all of us are kind of contributing to the sound, I suppose, rather than there maybe being like one kind of creative lead, which we really enjoy the process of that, particularly in recording, like just kind of building on sounds and seeing where they can go. The different players bring different elements. So, yeah.
How do you work in that sense when it comes then, say, to songwriting? I mean, the song indie folk has always had a genre in it that really thrives on storytelling. I mean, how do you work together then when it comes to telling those stories and the themes behind your songwriting?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few approaches. Like, I would say we did a lot more collaborative songwriting, when we were a bit younger, just because we had a bit more time on our hands. Whereas I'd say in the last couple of years, Ben will often start writing something separately and I'll do the same. And then we'll kind of bring them into the band space and finalise them together. But probably more recently, it's more that we're writing those songs independently and then bring them into the band. Rather than, like, melodically we're doing all of that together, but probably the songwriting itself is done separately.
Does it ever jump out of the democracy into the Rosie Republic or Rosie's Rules?
No, I don't think we've had any kind of meltdowns over that kind of thing. No, probably the only time is it's funny, like because Ben and I do a lot of harmonies and in recording in particular, we're known to just go a bit too far in adding layers, and we probably shouldn't add so many, but I know it's interesting how the way that somebody speaks, he often pulls me up on my accent. I think he thinks I'm a bit too ochre Australian and he kind of sings like an American, so sometimes there's meltdowns over the way I pronounce things.
But that's, I think that actually works for you because your voice, your vocals are so emotive. And I think have you developed your vocal style to really express that emotion, or is that something that's just happened naturally?
I don't really know. Thank you for saying that. I think probably I didn't ever intend to play music in front of anyone. It was really just a way of kind of expressing the way I feel about something, or like processing the way I feel about something that's happened. So maybe that's always kind of been there. I think my first song I wrote when I was 5 about the Easter Bunny, and I haven't really stopped writing since then. But the emotional part of it, I think, is just a processing thing, I think.
Are we going to see or hear that song about the Easter Bunny on at Semaphore maybe? Or save that for the box set in 20 years' time, hey?
Yeah, probably. I don't think it was particularly riveting, so I'll save people from listening to it.
How does it feel like when you put out a single, like your latest single, When I Was a Shelter? It's been getting a lot of attention, and I mean, look at some of the lyrics in this. It's, and I'm the avalanche that needs moving on, but how can I see through the blistering horror that's me? I mean, you don't that's Jim Steinman-esque, that's not just sitting there doing alliteration or rhyming and so on. That's a really deep, meaningful, evocative, insightful lyric. How does it feel when that sort of comes together and you're confronted with lyrics like that and then putting it to music and then recording? Is it a challenge, or you've got a great working relationship so you can trust each other to work together?
Yeah, I think, there's definitely a pretty deep friendship between us. So, we feel pretty comfortable in that space. That song was written by Ben, and a pretty kind of vulnerable song, I think, about some things that were happening in his life. And I don't want to speak for him, but I know, like, previous conversations we've had, it's sort of interesting how you're so embedded in the creative process of making a song and just enjoying that process, that as naive as it sounds, you don't actually really think about the part where you then have to put it out into the world. And it's often like the day before a release where you have a bit of a panic about, oh my God, this seems like we're really oversharing some personal things, and what if people hate it? But up until that point, it's an absolute joy to just kind of be oblivious to that and, be enjoying that process. So.
Then I learned that you was a storm all along. And I learned that you was a storm all along. And I'm the avalanche that needs moving on. But how can I see through the blister and horror that's me? As I stand next to you, like the sky in a pitch.
But I think that's where that fusion works, because your vocals, as said before, are quite emotive. His lyrics and his vocals sometimes can demonstrate that vulnerability, which for a male singer is such a fantastic thing to do. I mean, you go back into the 60s, like Roy Orbison was probably the first person to do it in the rock and roll sense, but it's such a vulnerable thing to do and share that, quite really saying, well, you write it down, you think, oh, I'm just going to share this with myself or my band, and all of a sudden it's on Spotify, or it's, in a songwriting prize competition. So it must be quite daunting sometimes and quite exhilarating other times.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I think probably that's kind of life, isn't it? Like, it's all the good things come when you are a bit vulnerable about things. So I think, and it's sort of one of the things I love about Ben's voice. Like, he's got this natural kind of waver to it, which I think gives that kind of emotion as well.
One of the key things I like about, we're in an era where, I was listening to a podcast yesterday with the Killers, and they said they felt a lot of pressure to make an electronic album because that was where the marketplace was going, and then they got to it and they said they just threw it out. It was just awful. And they went back and made a rock and roll album. Is that something that you guys struggle with to maintain, when we're moving towards a lot of electronic music and different genres are constantly evolving? Is it hard for Axe the Ivory to maintain your organic and folk-driven essence?
I mean, I think definitely I wouldn't be alone in saying that there's a lot of pressure for musicians sometimes to, it's a saturated market, and you love making music and performing music, so you want more opportunities, and sometimes you can feel like you're getting caught up in needing to be a particular sound to maybe increase your chances of getting heard. But I think at the end of the day, like, we sort of sound the way we sound, and it's interesting, like, we've had a lot of people say to us recently that when they've heard us play, it brings them back to this sound of, like, kind of early 2000s, and I think maybe sometimes they don't realise that because we're a bit we're all middle-aged. And that was probably when we don't tell anyone our age, but that was probably when our music was sort of first being formed. And I think it's definitely shaped by that. And, for better or worse, that's what we sound like. And I think we'll just keep making music and hopefully people want to listen to it. But, we definitely feel that pressure, but I don't think it really determines the music that we're making.
I think that's an interesting thing where that you can identify where, I suppose, the music started and all that, and your band members' ages, and that comes around how that can influence you. And then it's also you've got a point to come back to. I mean, I was reading your press release, and as soon as I saw the name Gregory Alan Isakov, I thought, my God, someone else in the world, someone else in Australia knows about this amazing singer-songwriter. And he's actually really well known in Australia, and he tours. But I thought to myself, that's why I identified with the music quite early on. And so I was saying to Deb, because let's talk to the Axe the Ivory, because you not only identified that as someone who your influences are, but also a matter of, well, this is someone who also shares this knowledge and this understanding of another songwriter who identifies with. So is that something which you think as a musician, but also most musicians, we're all fans as well, is that something that you think that the online world, the streaming world has opened up? I mean, 30 years ago, FM radio, commercial radio would never have been able to introduce us to someone like Isakov. And then that influences your styles as well. Is that something which you think has been a positive, I suppose, because the online world gets so many negative aspects to it? Do you think that's a positive thing for musicians to be able to access different musicians and different genres and influences now?
Yeah, 100%. I think, absolutely. And I think just to be able to connect with someone whose, lyrics you really kind of align with, or you like the way that they write, and having, so many different choices, that is a really positive thing for sure. And we kind of joke about sometimes, like, you discover a new artist, and then, you just obsessively listen to their work for a week or two, and you can kind of hear if you wrote a song at that time that, like people will say, oh, you're going through your Phoebe Bridgers phase, or like, whatever that might be. But no, I definitely think it's a positive thing. And, unfortunately, there's not a lot of positive things that get said about streaming, but I think being able to discover lots of different artists that maybe don't always have a huge following is really great.
You asked me to. If I wasn't a good wife, if I wasn't good to you, I guess there's a lot of transparent things we can't see through.
And that's the challenge, isn't it, too, now with streaming, I suppose. We have access to so many different things. You've got to find time to listen to all these things, don't you? It's so challenging. Yeah. I've got a list where it's like must listen to. I think it's about 10% of things have been listened to on there, and we've got that fear of missing out that I'm yet to find the next big thing there. Let's talk about performing. We're going to see you guys on the 7th of October at Semaphore. The band is Axe the Ivory, performed at varieties of venues and festivals. You've got, listen to this lineup. You've performed at Woodford Folk Festival, the Signet Folk Festival, Wingham Music Festival, now Semaphore on its 20th anniversary. We're coming up to an October long weekend. What's it mean when you get accepted to perform on these festival stages? Is it a form of reckoning or a form of acknowledgement, or it's just another challenge for you to maintain?
Oh, it's huge and super exciting. And I must admit, we tried to get into festivals for a really long time and didn't have a lot of success. So I would like to acknowledge that it was really only this year. Like, we played Woodford and Signet in January. We've got Wingham coming up and Semaphore. And I must admit, the first time, I remember Woodford, when we got the email, I went to delete it because I didn't think it was real, because I'm so used to seeing sorry, unfortunately, you've not been accepted. Yeah. It is, we feel really lucky to get to do that. And not only, so that we can play, but I think the great thing about a festival is then you get to meet just, all kinds of different bands that you've not heard before. So it's really cool to get exposed to that as well.
Yeah, I think the backstage interaction and the networking opportunity is just as exciting for the fan and the artist of it all, as opposed to the audience sitting out in the front of the stage. So I remember backstage at Blues Fest years ago, you go from meeting Billy Thorpe to various different Little Charlie from Little Charlie and the Nightcats, and just like you're in awe, and then all of a sudden Russell Crowe walks past, and it's like, where the hell am I? It's amazing to see. So
that's very cool. Hopefully, you're way less awkward than I am because I never seem to know what to say.
Just don't go up to Russell Crowe and say, "Oh, Chris Hemsworth, nice to meet you," because he gets upset at that.
Yeah, I would do that. Yeah.
What is it you think? Your music itself, we're going to come back to Semaphore in a moment and talk about that towards the end, but the music itself, I want to come back to that for a moment. It is deeply personal. It's often introspective and listening to it. How do you guys balance that vulnerability with then a desire to connect with a broader audience?
Do you mean like, what are the kinds of things that people want to be listening to?
Yeah.
Do you mean is that?
Because that's a hard thing to gauge, isn't it? Because we have such diverse audiences.
Yeah.
Is it a challenge? I mean, I was talking to a band last week, and they said some days we need to balance the light, and other days we need to balance the dark, and other days it needs to be a beige hybrid between the two.
Yeah.
Is it something you think about when you're crafting the songs, or you're just crafting the songs and then hoping that the audience embraces it like they have with your previous material?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of ways we do it. I mean, certainly I've made a really active effort in the last year not to write breakup songs anymore. So not that there's not a place for them, but like I've, written about imaginary friends and, childhood friends and all sorts of weird things. But so I think partly it's about, being conscious of the types of topics that you write about. But I think the other part of it too is we're definitely pretty mindful when we're putting a set together about wanting it to feel dynamic. So making sure, and, we're lucky in that sense because Ben and I write differently. There's just kind of a natural difference anyway. But making sure that we're sort of separating those tracks because there is some kind of sad, dark ones and kind of interspersing with the happy ones. And we've got actually a single coming out at the end of September, which is much more kind of almost folk, alt country and a lot of banjo and a bit more upbeat. So,
fantastic.
Yeah, we do think about those things.
Just mentioned them before about your fan base. What do you think is it about Axe the Ivory that resonates with your listeners and the people that come and see you live, that want to see you, that download your music, that listen to your music? What do you think is the main thing that resonates with them?
Look, I'm not really sure. I hope it's that, they enjoy we just love writing songs, so I hope lyrically they're connecting with that in some way. Certainly anytime anyone's kind of chatted, like if you're chatting to people after a gig, everyone seems to have a different favourite. So maybe just the kind of diversity maybe that we have.
It's funny you say that because
that
diversity is the exact thing that I was going to say. I think it's the diversity in your music. In that, it can be folk, it can be indie, it can be alt country, it can be bluegrass, it can be folk pop, it can be, traditional. There's all different things. If you had a record store, you would struggle to put your records in one particular section. And I think that's what the best thing about it is. One of the things I've seen as a writer and as a person who works on the other side is that since COVID, Australians and more so around the world, but we're becoming music fans rather than genre fans, and I think that's where a band like Axe the Ivory is going to thrive because it's not pigeonholed into one genre, and I think that's to your credit. So I think that diversity you mentioned is a real strong key to why the fans are resonating with your music.
Oh, thank you. And I really hope that, maybe that's a good point about, people maybe becoming more music fans rather than genre fans, because it can be a blessing and a curse. Like I know sometimes we really struggle and we joke with other musicians about when you're trying to get your music added to playlists in, the world of streaming.
Yeah.
And the kind of feedback that you get often is like, oh, it's not folk enough, it's not indie enough, it's not quite country enough. So when you're blurring between all of those, it's sometimes quite hard to find a place for it. So I think, it can be a positive thing, but also a tricky thing to navigate about, like, where does your music sit in the world of streaming and genres?
Give me 1 sec, sorry. Sorry, I've been waiting all day for Amazon package and it's just been delivered now. Sorry. I knew that was going to happen. Okay, sorry about that. Okay.
Hope it's something really exciting.
No, it's now anything over $100, Amazon make you, they send you a code and so on, and it's a studio light for our studio here. And because it's a couple $100 and so on, they won't leave unless you show the code. So I'm leaving my phone out the window, trying not to interrupt. So sorry, I do apologise. Sorry about that. So,
no, all good. That's very fun.
Okay, let's get back on track. Let's talk about the Semaphore Festival. We mentioned it briefly earlier. It's the 20th anniversary. Have you played Semaphore? Have you been to Semaphore as a fan yourself before?
So we've never. I actually live like a 5-minute walk away, so it's quite exciting. We've never played Semaphore music, so really stoked to be part of it. But have definitely gone to watch before. So yeah, very much looking forward to that.
What is it about Semaphore? I mean, we're looking at so many festivals, like Blues Fest is wrapping up. A lot of the larger mainstream festivals just can't survive, but we're seeing these smaller niche eclectic festivals surviving and in many cases thriving. I mean, this is the 20th anniversary. What do you think it is when you've been there as a fan? What do you think it is that keeps festivals like Semaphore going and growing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a really strong community / village feel around Semaphore itself as a place. And so I think they have a really strong kind of base of people who, like audiences who get involved every year. But I think they also make, they've got really interesting kind of choices around artists. Like I do think it's a pretty diverse in terms of musical taste, and I love that, they always kind of have, obviously, I mean, a lot of festivals do this, but those headline kind of acts, but they do really lean into supporting emerging and local artists as well, so people are discovering something new. So I don't know, maybe it's just a combination of all of those kinds of things, that make it a pretty great festival, and really easy to deal with too. They're really great bunch of people behind the scenes as well.
And what can we expect from Axe The Ivory, your upcoming performance at the Semaphore Music Festival?
What can you expect? No pyrotechnics. I think we're just going to focus on trying to play the songs well. And I think we are going to try a few new things though, because we've been working on some new tracks that we're recording at the moment. And so I think we'll have a bit of a different set than we've played the last few gigs. So that'll be really nice to try them out and see how they land. Is
that something you do as a band or as a group, that you'll play a song a couple of times live to test it out for a bit of a reaction, how not only the fans feel, but also how you feel before you go into record?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's probably two extremes. Like we have some songs that we deliberately don't add a lot around before going into the studio, because we kind of enjoy the process of seeing if it could go somewhere different. When you've got, when you're working with someone who can really easy, all over the tech to cut and paste things so you can hear how things sound differently. But yeah, we've definitely got some tracks that we use, the performance part, the public performance, to kind of nail down what feels like it's working or what needs to be changed.
Fantastic. Yeah. And you mentioned a new single coming out, you say September or end of September?
Yeah, it's 27th of September.
Just in time for the festival. And then you're heading, I saw on your website you've got a few tour dates. You're doing a bit of a tour throughout October and November.
Yeah, we've never done that. So this is new for us. Yeah, we're heading to Sydney and got Wingham Fest, and then heading up to Brisbane for a gig as well.
Fantastic.
So, that's pretty exciting.
I saw the Sydney tour date before. Well, that makes it nice and easy. I don't have to travel to South Australia or Brisbane or anywhere else. So,
that's true. Oh my God, come along.
I always see that venue playing. I think you're playing in, what's the place in Brisbane called? It's still a secret. And I always look at that and going, gee, I wonder when they're going to release the name of the venue. And about a month ago, I figured out that's the name of the venue. So
I think a lot of people
very confusing.
Yeah.
I thought, it's cool. It's a secret gig. One of those things where you find out on the day of, and it's like, yeah, no, but look, it's a bit
counterintuitive if you want to promote it.
Exactly. So look, we're going to put those tour dates in the put a link to your tour dates, I should say, in the show notes for today, and so people can get along there, and hope to see you all.
Thank you.
Last question before we let you go. We ask the same question of everyone, so I'm going to ask you, Rosie. What's it like to be Rosie Roberts when you walk out on stage as part of Axe the Ivory?
Absolutely terrified. It's probably not the response you're looking for, but
No,
I'm
it's
a
perfect.
pretty introverted person, so I love it, and I also am terrified, but I love it enough to do it, I guess.
Look, I've done these interviews with a lot of people from, major international stars, and one particular star, I won't say who's multi-million seller recording artist, and said after 30 years, still petrified every single night. The scariest thing he'd ever did. And he chewed gum as a result, and he just went through packets and packets of chewing gum. So whatever it is, but as long as you're not absolutely terrified that you don't head back on stage, we want to see yourself and the band on stage, and we're looking forward to seeing you all at the Semaphore Music Festival in a few weeks' time. But Rosie, it's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast today. We can't wait to see you and the rest of the band perform at Axe the Ivory. October 7th, I think, is your gig there, starting the October long weekend. And to our listeners out there, be sure to follow Axe the Ivory on social media. Check out their latest single and keep an eye out for the new single coming out at the end of the month. And again, you can catch them live at the festival on the 7th of October. Rosie, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you all next time at the Semaphore Music Festival.
That's awesome, Adam. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.